Amphoreus is cyclical in nature. The crisis heirs of the current cycle will be the Titans in the next one once Era Nova is initiated. However, upon learning the truth of their origin and their purpose, strings of numbers to complete the refinement of a certain Lord Ravager, the last two crisis heirs of the current cycle rebelled against their destiny. Kaslana erased Cyrene's existence, causing an error in the system, and using the power granted by Fully, they reset the cycle to its beginning over and over again to prevent the birth of that Lord Ravager. This is basically what we learn in the 3.4 quest, but I'm sure the back and forth narration might confuse some of us. I mean, kudos to Kaslana for never losing counts of the cycles he's been through and the core flames he's taken. So now, I'm gonna try to untangle the confusion. We'll talk about the Scepters, the Irontomb, Finon's unwavering spirit, Cyrene's sacrifice, and everything else in between. So grab a seat, because we are about to travel in time all the way back to the very beginning, to the very source of the suffering of Amphoreus. And while you do that, getting yourself comfortable and all, let's hear a word from today's sponsor, LD Shop. LD Shop is a top-up service where you can make in-game purchases at a discount. Looking to buy a monthly supply pass? LD Shop has it. Looking to pull for Finon? There's the guarantee bundle for you. Maybe get his Litecoin too while you're at it. The options are endless. And the process is super simple. All you need to make a purchase is your game server and UID, and then your top-up will be sent to you within minutes. LD Shop has been used by thousands of people, and all the reviews prove just how safe and reliable the service is. Also, if you still have the double top-up bonus after the anniversary reset, this bonus also works if you make your purchase through LD Shop. So why not top up there and get your bonus for cheaper? Better still, after spending over $80, you'll be eligible for a VIP membership which comes with a free supply pass. So, if you're a spending player and looking to bring Kaslana home, use my link in the description below to make your first purchase to get 15% and 5% off coupons and save up to $50. Thank you LD Shop for sponsoring this video, and now it is time to reset the timeline back to the era of Rubert II. Unlike the original Emperor Rubert that was an inorganic life, Rubert II was an organic being, a man with limited brain capacity. To combat this limitation, he built an inorganic neuron cluster of celestial-level computational devices, basically a cosmic-level brain. This neuron cluster would be later known as the Scepter system. One scepter is said to be the size of a planet, its power surpassing all that humans could comprehend, and Rubert II built all of them, all ready to serve him as their sole master, so to speak. Unfortunately, or fortunately, I suppose, Rubert II died before he could use the scepters to their full potential. He was meaning to expand his mind through an experiment called self-coronation, an experiment that could make him a much bigger threat to the cosmos. But before he could complete that experiment, Polka Kakamon showed up and killed him, allegedly. Their master gone, the ownership of the scepters were handed over to the Intelligentsia Guild by the IPC. While the guild initially agreed to share the power of these cosmic-level computers among the scholars, some party grew greedy. Driven by desire to synthesize a genius, one that could pledge an allegiance to the guild instead of the genius society, they attempted to seize the scepters for themselves. This led to an event recorded in the dark history of the guild, an event known as the Scholar's Strife. One thing led to another until eventually the scepters were rendered useless, overloaded by questions asked by the scholars.
But after the Scholar's Strife, everything was destroyed. Now, it's just a tourist attraction and space junk.
All of this is what we learn from the Antinomic Worlds quest, the quest that comes alongside the Unknowable Domain, the expansion of the Simulated Universe in version 2.6. There's a more elaborate explanation on the quest, by the way, in a different video that I made a few months ago if you want to learn more. However, what we knew then was not the whole truth. One question asked by Herda to Polka Kakamon in that quest remained unanswered. See, there's this thing called the circle of knowledge that everyone in the universe is confined to. The more things you know means the bigger your circle is and the more you're aware of the things that you don't know. As long as everyone stays in the circle, the future of the universe remains predetermined. Everything is predictable because Nous has calculated so. If you step out, who knows what kind of unpredictability that would happen. Worst case scenario, they might trigger finality. So Polka Kakamon makes it her mission to eliminate anyone who tries to leave this circle. She doesn't want finality to come prematurely, basically. And ironically, these individuals are more likely to be Genius Society members because the very reason they earn a spot in the society is that they want to understand more. They want to know more than what they already know about. That is why Polka is known to be a Genius Society killer. Most of those who attempted to leave the circle of knowledge were members of the society. Rubert II was one of them. The self-coronation that led to his death could have perfected the anti-organic equation, a refinement of which could potentially lead to the destruction of all civilizations. Polka killed the butterfly before it could flap its wings. Now, what Herda asked Polka is this. If Nous really wants to confine the universe within the circle of knowledge, why did they allow Rubert to create the Scepters? Instead of counting on Polka to eliminate him before the experiment could take place, why didn't Nous stop Rubert from building the Scepters to begin with? Why didn't Polka arrive before the creation of the Scepters? This silenced Polka for a second and earned Herda a little compliment from the Lord of Silence. Now, fast forward to 3.4, Lycus proposed an answer to the question. He believed that the construction of the Scepters was part of Nous's plan all along. From the moment Rubert II inherited the memories of the original Rubert, then rewrote the anti-organic equation, built the Scepters, and even started the Second Emperor's War, all of that was him carrying Nous's thoughts. All was part of Nous's grand calculation that anchored down the universe while they seek the optimal solution for the war among the eons. Nous let Rubert II build the Scepter because they wanted to use the Scepters for themselves. It is unclear when exactly Nous took over the ownership of the Scepters. Maybe they have always belonged to Nous, maybe Nous took over after the Scholar Strife, but the latter seems unlikely according to Lygus as the timelines don't match. Point is, after all of the Scepters were allegedly shut down after the era of the Scholar Strife, some slipped through the net and continued their extrapolation, trying to answer Nous's questions. One of them was disabled by a scrollum some Ember eras ago. Another was what has been extrapolating the simulated world known as Amphoreus. If you remember Anax's recent trial, he was asked two questions by Circes. One was, what exactly are we? As in, the essence of all lives in Amphoreus, a question that Anaxa was able to answer, thus granting him the status of demigod. The second question was a follow-up to Anax's answer. He said that there were memories and were born from one. So if that's true, Circe asked, then where did the first memories come from? Whose memories were these that Amphoreus originated from? Or as rephrased by many sages across ages, what is the prime mover of life? This is the question that Amphoreus' scepter has been extrapolating and trying to find the answer to, so it simulates a world that we know better as Amphoreus. Lycus came in sometime in the early cycles of the extrapolation, if not all the way from the beginning. His record in the As of Written book says that he's the admin of the simulation as well as its prime mover. Where does life in Amphoreus originate from? It originates from the extrapolation of a scepter, and Lygus is playing God in this simulation. While the scepter was initially on the path of erudition, extrapolating to answer a question from the eon of erudition, the trajectory of its path shifted to destruction after Lygus' intervention. He noted that when the prime mover of life is set as the calculation target, the result it returns is the anti-organic equation, a result that seems contradictory with life itself. However, Lygus wondered if it was much simpler than that. Perhaps, in understanding why life begins, it allows one to deduce why it ends. On top of that, Lygus wondered why the scepter that was known to be a creation of Rubert II would run a calculation directed by Nous. This eventually led him to believe that Nous was the one behind this all along, that Rubert II had always been Nous's puppet. In fact, every genius that has earned their place within the society is a prisoner of the erudition, himself included. Oh yeah, he is a Genius Society member, by the way. The scepter recognized his society ID before granting him access to the system. Anyway, Lygus sort of hates Nous for it. In his effort to rebel against the god that quote-unquote imprisons him, he loaded the destruction as a core variable into the simulation and made it the equation goal to refine within the simulation. What began as an extrapolation to answer a question from the eon of erudition becomes a weapon of destruction with the erudition themselves as its target. And what is this weapon of destruction, you might ask? It is the scepter itself that has caught Nanook's gaze in one of the cycles, thus transcending to become a Lord Ravager known as the Irontomb. I have a lot to say, by the way, about the fact that the scepter became an emanator simply after catching Nanook's gaze, but that's a topic for a different time. So the cycle of the scepter's extrapolation goes something like this. The extrapolation has been running for roughly 20.3 million cycles, and its end goal is to refine the destruction equation. However, that goal has not been fulfilled. The final version of Irontomb has yet to leave Amphoreus because the final cycle that should have completed this process is stuck in a loop that has been resetting for 33,550,336 times. The cycle that Kaslana has been reliving millions times over, it was that final cycle. I suppose this is where the confusion might come from. See, there are two separate things here. The first one, let's call it the cycle, is what the Scepter has been extrapolating for 28 million times. 28,371,292 times, according to the record in the As of Written book. It says that every cycle that has completed its iteration will be archived, and the sequence that is recorded ends at that number, so that's how I arrived there. Naias, Calypso, Polyxia, and Chaos were the Chrysos heirs in one of those cycles, the second to last. The second instance is the isolated final cycle that has never reached completion because of Cyrene and Kaslana's intervention. They keep resetting this final cycle to its beginning to prevent the emergence of the Irontomb. Lygus refers to this loop as the Eternal Recurrence, or ER for short, and I think that is so messed up because you know what else ER stands for? No, not Energy Recharge, that is a different game. ER also stands for Elysian Realm. Since the 33 million loops were made possible by Cyrene, who is a variant of Elysia from Honkai Impact, that is so clever but also messed up. Anyway, to differentiate it with the Scepter cycle, I will refer to the second instance as ER. And I'm pretty sure that Cyrene and Kaslana have only been repeating their own cycle because of two things. One is that the Scepter's extrapolation consists of 3 phases. Phase 1, which started from the first cycle and lasted for 50,000 cycles, was a simulation populated with inorganic beings. It wasn't until the third phase that human was introduced into the simulation. So it makes no sense for Kaslana and Cyrene to be going back to the very first cycle of the simulation because their data entities had yet to exist then. Secondly, remember Anaxa's conclusion. Amphoreus is cyclical in nature. The Chrysos heirs of today will be the Titans of tomorrow. If Kaslana is going through many different cycles, then we should have seen different sets of Chrysos heirs. So yeah, it is just one cycle that is stuck in the ER. Also, there are some notes that Lygus made throughout his watch over Amphoreus, which explain a lot of phenomena we've witnessed throughout the Flamechase journey and answer some questions. The first is about cycle 5121, the final cycle in the inorganic phase, which was when the Scepter earned Nanook's gaze. A data entity during that particular cycle committed an act of destruction for the first time within the simulation, thus catching Nanook's attention. At the end of this cycle, Lygus sent the first copy of the destruction equation out of Amphoreus, an incident that caused a seismic collapse on Lecteris Nebula. This incident was recorded by the IPC as an attack from a new Lord Ravager, and they codenamed this Lord Ravager Irontomb. As not creative as he was, Lygus adopted that name to refer to the Scepter ever since. I mean, easier to pronounce than Delta Mi 13 for sure. It was also from here on that the data entities started to manifest golden blood. 32 cycles after the start of the human phase, the concept of religious worship appeared. Nearing the 4 million cycle, the ratio of divinity was increased, which I suppose means that the gods are more revered than ever. Lygus noted that once the technological development stagnant, humans began hunting down gods out of their hunger for power and energy, which sounds like the blueprint to what's later known as the Flamechase journey. Then the concept of path was introduced after 7 million cycles. The data entities were split into 2 groups. Some were preserved as gods in the next cycle, while its identical factor was set up to be the god's competitive other half. Yes, this is the beginning of the Titans and Chrysos heirs dynamic. Interestingly, the construct between the 2 groups were made to mimic those of Eons and Past Riders. I mean, leave it to a genius to believe that Past Riders have the capacity to take over the Eons and experiment on it to know the success rate of such pursuit. Close to 12 million cycles in, the Black Tide was introduced to the system. This phenomena was first observed in the second phase. In its core, the Black Tide is not a physical entity, but rather a visual effect of the infection within the simulation. Where did it come from? System overload, basically. There's a certain limit to what is considered acceptable chaos in the system. Once the simulation reached that limit, it would display the Black Tide as visual glitches. So no, it is not the anti-organic equation. Now, Aeronova was the upgraded version of Amphoreus' auto-recycling feature, driven by a data entity's decision in the 90 millionth cycle. The Past Rider group would now actively go after the Eon group to claim their power. The first notable completion of Aranova happened in the 28,371,272 second cycle, resulting in a high energy reaction from Nanook and significant evolution of the destruction equation. I suppose this is when Lygus decided that each cycle must complete Aranova in order to quicken the completion of Irontomb, and it would have been completed had Lygus not seen it necessary to do his villain speech in front of Cyrene and Kaslana. Now we're on to the fun part, most heartbreaking, but fun. We've arrived in the very last cycles of the Scepters extrapolation. Here we learn that Cyrene was in fact the Crisis Heir meant to claim Ornyx's core flame. After Addis Elysia was lost to the Black Tide, she and Kaslana set out on their journey. Kaslana ended up in Okima, answering to Aglaya's call for the continuation of the Flame Chest journey, while Cyrene continued her study at Unisopolis. One by one, the Crisis Heirs met their end as prophesied because there's a certain ending designed for each data entity. Although it does make me wonder, if Kaslana was yet to be the Flame River then, and the original Mighty also only told Kaslana about his Achilles heel, how did Mighty die? Anyway, it was the end of the world, and Kaslana and Cyrene were the last two Crisis Heirs at the end of the cycle. They witnessed the true nature of the world, and thanks to a childhood dream that she had, Cyrene was able to conclude that they were not real human. But they pressed on. They only needed to return the last two core flames to reach Aranova. Whatever would happen afterwards, be it a promised new tomorrow or oblivion, they would face it bravely. So they rushed to retrieve Ornyx's core flame, who willingly gave it away and even helped them reach the vortex of Genesis. Lygus was waiting for them there, and this was most likely the same scene that we witnessed the beginning of at the end of the 3.3 quest. Remember how Finon's name was redacted and he looked not at all surprised when his dead friend waltzed into the vortex? Yeah, it was redacted because it was not Finon. He was Kaslana from the original cycle. He was not surprised to see Cyrene because in the original cycle, Cyrene did not die in Addis Elysia. Lygus felt generous that day. Perhaps he was overconfident that these data entities would simply follow his order without complaint. Perhaps it was his plan all along to turn Kaslana into a killing machine with 33 million cycle worth of hatred. But he felt it necessary to share the truth with the two. Embrace the Black Tide, he said, so you could step out of the Matrix, be real people, and fulfill the Irontomb's wish. Come, kill a god with me. And Cyrene was like, how about no? Betting on the childhood dream that she had, Cyrene believed that Nanook was not the only Eon that had taken interest in Amphoreus. There were other Eons, at least one other, and that was the Eon that appeared in her childhood dream in the dark room beyond Ornyx's crystal-like glowing curtain, a description that immediately reminded me of Fully. Since that Eon appeared in her dream alongside Ornyx, Cyrene believed that time was the page on which they recorded Amphoreus. Should that page be removed from Amphoreus, that would definitely attract their gaze. So instead of accepting Lygus's invitation, giving in to the destruction, Cyrene would put Amphoreus in a long dream to trick it into believing that the experiment had not ended, that the final cycle was still on progress, pausing the completion of Irontomb. With the power of time combined with the gaze granted by Fully, she would reset the cycle back to its beginning. Since Ornyx had surrendered their power to Cyrene, erasing time means erasing her existence. Cyrene must die. Now, this is interesting. Considering Fully has appeared in her dream alongside Ornyx, it implies that Fully has already taken an interest in Amphoreus. Cyrene erasing time to catch Fully's gaze would not be the first time they gazed on the planet. And I don't think it'll be a gaze directed at Amphoreus as a whole, but at Cyrene specifically. She said that this gaze would span space and time, allowing every incarnation of herself to reset time. It was her soul that she would put into the blade that Kaslana would be using to perform the reset at the end of every ER. Fully gazed at Cyrene, granting her power to reset time. And what is the definition of eminators again? Individuals who have their power granted directly by the eons. Cyrene's sacrifice made her an emanator of remembrance. This is how she's able to reset a simulation created by a machine that has also transcended to the level of eminators. Just as Gallagher said, if you don't have a Stellaron, the only way you could conjure up islands in the Sea of Memoria is if you get help from an emanator of Enigmata or Remembrance. If Cyrene did become an emanator of Remembrance, resetting a world made out of data and Memoria to its beginning would not be that difficult for her. which then would make her a memo keeper, which means she would have to shed her quote-unquote physical body, which could be the origin of March 7th, because even Cyrene herself acknowledged their similarities, but that's besides the point. With Cyrene ready to sacrifice herself, Kaslana chose to stay back. He would enter the ER because he was the only other person who knew the truth of the world. He had to be part of the ER to ensure that this last cycle would never complete Aeronova. Cyrene bid him farewell, and with his own blade, Kaslana took Cyrene's life and reset the final Aeronova for the first time, becoming the first iteration of the Flame River. What I find the most heartbreaking here is the fact that both Cyrene and Kaslana believed that future versions of themselves would make the same decision they had made once they knew the truth. The reason Kaslana must be part of every ER is so that the cycle would never complete Aeronova, which means that he must always collect all the 12 core flames for himself rather than letting it become energy for the Irontomb, either taking it directly from the Titans before the Crisis Heirs could get to them, or from the Crisis Heirs afterwards. He must be the sole owner of all of them. In the early ERs, we saw him collecting them with not much pushback. Saridra agreed to work together with him, letting him take the core flames as long as he helped the Crisis Heirs defeat the Titans. Later on, there's a lot more pushback that he eventually had to fight his old companions and kill them for the core flames. But in every ER, there is always one Crisis Heir who did not fight him back, who readily gave their life so that Kaslana could take their core flame, and that Crisis Heir was Cyrene. The Cyrene that was murdered by the Flame River in front of Finan back in Iris Elysiae? That was not the first time Cyrene let Flame River kill her. Unfortunately, collecting the core flames and resetting the timeline was the best that they could do. Once the end is almost reached, Kaslana would reset the time, he would return to the beginning and repeat. Eventually, his body would break. But before that could happen, Kaslana figured out that he could pass on his memories and all the core flames within him to the Kaslana in the current ER, trusting that his next incarnation would make the same decision he did, just as Cyrene trusted her next incarnation. This happened after the 4 millionth ER. It is heartbreaking, but also ironic, because the Scepter was an indirect creation of Nous. It was created to run calculations for them, but it eventually rebelled against the Aeon. Its one goal shifted from assisting Nous to wanting to kill them. So it created Kaslana and Cyrene as extensions of its plan for destruction, but then they rebelled against the Scepter. Their one goal was to kill their creator too. So if Lycus's assessment about Nous is correct, that Nous really is seeking the optimal solution for the war among the Aeons, it is no wonder that Nous let Rubert II build the Scepters in the first place. Nous will not perish in the hands of a mere rebelling Scepter, because that Scepter's creations are now seeking to destroy destruction themselves. Nous really be playing 4D chess game here. And Nous's grand calculation will come to fruition because now the Nameless has entered the equation. Millions of ERs have passed, and every attempt Kaslana makes to destroy the Scepter's core has always been pointless. He collected all the core flames hoping the result would be different, but the doomed fate of the world was already predetermined. Putting Amphoreus in a long dream to delay the birth of the Irontomb is the best that he and Cyrene could do. To defeat it, they would need help from the outside world, external variables, a role that has always been assumed by the Nameless of the Astral Express. A role that Kaslana eventually left in Trailblazer's hand as he combined his pent-up wrath and the power of the 400 million core flames to try to destroy the Scepter's core one last time. The role of the Deliverer turns out to be not meant for just one person. Kaslana has carried the weight of the world for 33 million cycles all by himself, but now help has arrived on Amphoreus. While he has embarked on his journey as a Nameless Hero, the Deliverer meant to protect the world, another Nameless has arrived to continue the journey in his stead. Maybe his last act of defiance against his creator has been in vain because he has now merged with Irontomb, but if even gods could bleed, there's a high chance the Nameless could defeat Irontomb. I mean, while the Scepter might be the all-knowing god of Amphoreus, the source of all life within the simulation, when it is observed from beyond the sky, it is still just a Scepter. A Lord Ravager, yes, but it is incomplete, and its original creator was a genius. The Nameless got 2 of those helping them out now, 3 if you count Polkakakamon. So Krulum once successfully disabled a Scepter all by himself. The situation in that Scepter was similar to Irontomb, except that it was not a destruction emanator surely, but fear not. As Herda said, we fight magic with magic, science with science, machine brain with machine brain, and emanator with emanator. We have an erudition emanator assisting us from the outside and possibly a remembrance emanator from the inside. It is 2 versus 1, and I'm weirdly hopeful that Polka will show up in Amphoreus because the signs are all there. Firstly, are you familiar with the Kill That Butterfly Curia? The scalpel in that curio belongs to Polka, the weapon that she uses to kill the butterfly of chaotic possibilities. For Skrulum to say that the butterfly has already flapped its wings, it means that Polka will soon make her move to kill that butterfly. And secondly, the operator of the scepter that Skrulum disabled perished during a self-coronation, an experiment that led to Rubert II's death. Polka was the one who killed Rubert. It is likely that she's also the one behind the death of that other scepter's operator. Thirdly, and this one got a big laugh out of me, is that Lygus specifically modified the Irontomb to ensure that the experimental ripples from the scepter would be fully contained. This was necessary to keep Irontomb undetected by Polka Kakamond. He mentioned her by name. This was the reason Amphoreus could not be seen from the outside world. Lygus hid the planet because he was afraid that Polka would end him the moment she caught wind of his experiment. And Polka might have already caught wind of it because a certain memo keeper revealed Amphoreus' location to the Express crew. So when you think about it, this chain reaction of events, the Nameless arriving on Amphoreus, the less immoral geniuses getting involved, and possibly the infamous genius killer taking part in it, all of that started out because Black Swan wanted to go to Amphoreus. Her suggestions to go to Amphoreus is about to free Cyrene, Kaslana, and the rest of the Chrysos heirs from the doomed fate of the world. Time and time again, Black Swan has beat the sus allegation. Just like Cyrene, who bet on Fully to alter the course of Amphoreus' doomed fate, I will always bet on Black Swan to be one of the good guys. So, counting on Polka hopefully coming to get rid of Lygus, Herda and Cyrene would take care of the emanator side of the scepter, while Skrulum would disable the machinery part of it. Everything is gonna be alright. Maybe. I hope so. I mean, we still have 3 more patches to go before Amphoreus ends, right? And if all the fiction reading I've done has taught me anything, is that if hope seems to be within reach when we're only halfway through the story, something terrible is going to happen in the end. But hey, don't listen to me, I don't know what I'm talking about, listen to Shaoji. Amphoreus 2 will be a heartwarming story, he said, just like Penacony. And hey, if you're still here, thank you for the 10,000 subs. You guys are awesome. To celebrate this milestone, I'm thinking of doing a Q&A session, but I'm not sure if I want to do it in a stream or make a video out of it. Let me know in the comment below if you prefer one over the other, and I will see you in the next one.